All right, we're live. Let's see how this is looking. Let me double check something on my end. All right, is it working? Okay, sorry about that. Alrighty, well, wanted to take a moment to talk about some data that recently came out related to tech worker salary satisfaction, and I apologize for my voice this morning. I'm fighting off a bit of a cold. So I saw this info in an article, but this was the source, which was this dice.com survey they do. And Dice is essentially a freelancer job hub. So essentially, I shouldn't say freelancer, but it's essentially contract work. So if you're a contract worker, then you would go here and essentially find, permanent or temporary and temporary to permanent type roles. And a lot of times they are going to be for tech companies. So let me see. I'm just checking one thing here real quick. Let me try something else here. Sorry, I'm just making an adjustment on my end before we get too far into this. Making an adjustment. Okay, I think we're good. All right, so anyways, the report comes from dice.com, this site here, and Dice is essentially a hub for contracts, which can be job contracts for a lot of times tech type roles, which like we can even look at, actually, let's look at it here. See what kind of roles they have right now. So they're very much explicitly focused on tech roles, tech type jobs, and basically contract openings at a lot of these tech companies, which bring people on. Sometimes they're temporary roles, and a lot of times they will have a temporary to permanent designation. So at some point, 6 months or a year into the role, if you're doing well, the company will basically convert you to a full-time regular worker. However, I know from friends and other people I know in tech that oftentimes you do end up making quite a bit more just doing pure contract work for companies like these, or using a company like this to get contracts. And so the hourly rates tend to be very high, depending on the company too that you're doing work for. But again, it kind of runs the gamut of role types. They have engineering openings, product management type openings, L&D openings, whether you want remote or not. So, business analysts, things like that, UI, UX type work. So UX, yeah. So there's a lot of, again, very tech focused roles and openings that that they provide. So anyways, they're a great they're a great entity to be facilitating a survey like this. But I wanted to just look at this survey that they recently published, and basically the TLDR here, which the title signals, is most tech workers are unhappy with their pay at the moment. But let's just read it and we'll kind of talk through some of the info here. So it says, in the overview, our findings reveal another year of decline in salary satisfaction by tech workers. In 2022, 30% of tech professionals reported that they were either very dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied with their salaries. Not a big surprise. Certainly, costs were rising quite a bit and salaries were not in 2022 and going into 2023, and that included the tech sector. And obviously, even layoffs started occurring a lot more frequently starting in 2022 in the tech industry. So in 2023, that percentage increased to 35%. Not a huge jump there, 30 to 35%. Considering the slowdown of salary growth, this is not surprising. Significantly more tech professionals, 12%, reported that their salaries went down this year. In 2022, only 6% reported a decreased salary. So I've only heard of basically one, or I should say I have one individual personally who I know experienced this in, I believe it was 2020 or 2021, where the tech company they were with essentially went through and started reducing salaries for people. And the company was very heavily positioned in the retail space. And so in 2020, obviously, retail shut down. A lot of retail operations suffered tremendously, and a lot of the support services for those businesses suffered tremendously. So it made sense. Obviously, their bottom line decreased a lot as a result of that. But this person was also in engineering, so they were a software engineering manager. They were in management as well. Typically not the roles and the teams that get hit hard, with those types of reductions. But anyways, that was the end result. Was they were told, hey, we're just letting you know we're dropping your salary. So, and I want to say it was like kind of significant. I don't remember the exact percentage, but it wasn't like a 2-3% reduction. Like it was like a double-digit percentage reduction in their salary. So that is kind of interesting, especially just considering that generally in the tech world, the job-to-job increases that you can achieve are usually pretty substantial. Sometimes you can make like 10 and even 15% jumps from literally just spend a couple years in this company, go to another company, and get a 10 to 15% increase. Just depends, the role too that you're fulfilling. But we'll continue here. They also noticed the connection between overall salary satisfaction, years of experience, and age. Tech workers earlier in their career report the most dissatisfaction. Not a surprise. Gen Z, looking at you. While only 31% of tech professionals with over 15 years of experience reported dissatisfaction. So Yeah, we'll keep reading. Increased job security. What's behind the gap? Increased job security from skill-based expertise, increased benefits over time, and more years climbing the career ladder are no doubt factors that contribute to increased satisfaction in more tenured tech talent. Businesses face challenges related to growth, revenue, and competition. Our findings support the notion that investment into the right benefits, including traditional ones such as healthcare and training, can be useful in attracting and maintaining skilled talent. It's also important to note that salary satisfaction among tech professionals outpace their non-tech counterparts by a significant margin. That's kind of interesting. So 49% versus 34%. So basically saying that other industries had even less satisfaction actually. And despite the issues and challenges confronting them daily, many tech professionals clearly feel that they're earning what they deserve, which you can't always say for those in non-tech roles. Yeah, and I think that continues to be the draw for a lot of folks to tech and to the tech industry is there's, pay and benefits, generally speaking, are still strong. I mean, compared to any other industry, if you're going to go to school for something, and a lot more tech companies obviously are venturing out into other arenas, right? Hardware and software services. So you can certainly go to school for a range of focuses and find yourself getting hired by any number of tech companies in different locations as well. So unemployment and layoffs. The massive spike in layoffs at the beginning of 2023 had a major impact on a sizable portion of tech professionals. 10% of our respondents were laid off themselves. So that's, significant. You think of 10%. And 25% are still worried about layoffs at their companies. Of those that were laid off, a portion of them, 23%, took more than 6 months to find another job. For context, in the broader job market outside of tech, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that the average time it took to find a job after unemployment was 9.2 weeks. Interesting. As severance pay and termination bonuses remain an unregulated landscape in the U.S., there is no standard package tech professionals can expect to receive if they were laid off. With roughly 3/4 of laid-off workers taking 2 months or more to find a new job, there is always a risk that a layoff will impact tech professionals' personal finances. And certainly in the last couple years, with inflation, the number I've referenced before, we've just had an explosion in credit card debt, and more people are using credit cards just to pay for the basics, which is terrifying, especially considering, and just in my personal experience, I'll just share, I have a single credit card, which I just use for random things that come up. I don't carry balances on it, but for a while, years that I've had that card, the interest rate floated around like 8 and maybe 12% at its worst. In the last 3 years, it has gone up to, I think right now it's at like 29% or something like that. It's incredibly high now. So you got to imagine most other credit cards for people are in a similar place, and there's no like warning when they do that, right? They don't email you and say, hey, we're going to increase your credit card interest rate when they do it. So it is just complete, and then add to that if you have auto payments, typically. A lot of people do that, right? So they have their auto payment, and I guess if they're paying a minimum, then suddenly they'll notice, oh, I'm not even paying the minimum now. I don't know how that gets reconciled necessarily when that happens, in a auto payment situation. But yeah, it's not a good situation, generally speaking, for people to be needing a credit card in order to just pay for like monthly expenses. Definitely not going to be set up for success. I really love Caleb Hammer's channel, and I think that's just like a great perspective on all these very, individual situations of finances and how quickly and easily people are getting into debt. Just regular average people who have good jobs, high paying jobs. So sometimes that's not even the issue, right? It's not so much about the money you make, it's about the money you keep, generally speaking, right? So, as severance pay and termination bonuses remain an unregulated landscape in the U.S., there is no standard package tech professionals can expect to receive if they are laid off. And I'll share just from my personal experience with a layoff. I was laid off from a role. That role, I was actually laid off right before taking short-term leave for paternity leave. And I was going to take, I think it was 5 weeks. And so they decided right before that was going to begin that they would essentially lay me off. And there was other reasons for it, but they gave me a severance. And that severance covered 5 weeks. That's what it covered at the time. So they were just kind of, I think, covering their butt because of the nature of my circumstance. But yeah, generally speaking, I think the lower level you are in a company, the worse your severance package is going to be. Management tends to obviously get a little bit better package, but we saw that in some of the numbers in these last few weeks watching the tech company layoffs, and we were kind of correlating, how much severance with some of the companies reported, they're putting 3 to 5 million aside as severance, and then connecting that to their kind of overall budgetary reasoning for the layoffs. But then it's they're doing a 10% reduction, which in some of these cases is 1,000 people, upwards of 1,000 people, and several hundred people in a lot of cases. And they've put, 3 million aside as part of the severances. So you just start to calculate that out, and just proportionately, it's not that much money that people are going to be walking away with. You might be able to pay your bills for 1 or 2 more months in a lot of cases. So very interesting point that they have about that. I think it's very, very real for somebody who's getting laid off in tech. For tech professionals who want to prepare for a possible layoff, there are some straightforward steps you can take. This is just some details related to their business, I think, for their business's sake. So here's the chart from the data here, which their question was, how, if at all, have you been impacted by tech layoffs that have been in the news recently? And 10% said they've been laid off. Team members have been laid off 22%. That's interesting. So people have had team members laid off. I'm worried about layoffs, 25%. And then 53% have said none of the above. So that's really interesting. There's still a, albeit slight majority of folks who have not had any, peripheral layoff or anything that they've experienced in the tech industry. That's encouraging, actually, too, because it kind of helps. I feel like that's good insight to help kind of frame. It just kind of helps to frame the severity of these things, right, at the end of the day. And so on the surface, a lot of times with the news, right, it looks like these things are a lot more severe than they may actually be. But if 53% of people are saying they don't or haven't experienced or even been in a company where teammates have been let go, that's, kind of important to keep in mind here. So, related to job seeking, the job insecurity and salary dissatisfaction that tech professionals face is likely to lead to a lot of turnover in 2024. That's kind of interesting because I've been seeing some things. They coined the Great Stay. So there was the Great Resignation, 2021. 2020 through 2023, really 2022, I guess. That's what they were calling that phase of time. People were getting obviously very disillusioned with the circumstances of lockdowns, some of the added stress to obviously certain roles that are kind of very, frontline facing roles, healthcare, retail, all of the hoops having to be jumped through. It was a lot for a lot of people in those industries. And a lot of people just straight left, right? A lot of people just straight quit and retired early. I know personally multiple people who were essentially near retirement and made the choice it was just going to be easier to retire a little earlier, or in some cases were just straight up asked by their employer to retire. Now, as far as some of the things I've been seeing for this year, people are reporting that, workers are basically looking to try and anchor themselves down where they are, accept the role they're in, just kind of maintain what they got, right? Keep it status quo. So, I mean, yes, the salary dissatisfaction that this report shows is something. I don't think it's like, again, there's not even a majority of people here that have been affected in any way peripherally or directly by these tech layoffs. So, yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily going to hold up, but we'll continue here. 29% of those they surveyed are actively looking for a job. I mean, I feel like that's just something people are doing. So that people do that, right? So it'd be interesting to understand like what qualifies as searching for a job. Did you open up Glassdoor and look through some recommended posts? Does that qualify? Are you literally interviewing? And it says that's versus 8% who aren't open at all to a new role. Yeah, so maybe getting some more insight onto that. Those metrics would be helpful too. Unsurprisingly, there is a strong correlation between higher salaries and a decreased interest in leaving a current job, which that was kind of what I was speaking to here. For the nearly 3 in 10 tech professionals looking for a new job, possessing the right skills could yield some opportunities to start a conversation with a recruiter. Those who are specialized could field offers from companies undergoing digital transformation, blah, blah, blah. Pushing into new areas such as AI, edge computing, and more. Okay. The whole AI thing, we talk a lot about this, and friends of mine in tech and colleagues and such. The whole AI thing, as amazing as that is, it's not really at a point where these companies have just like fully figured out how to just completely upend entire parts of their business and replace it with AI. So that argument where I'm not saying it's not happening, I think it is. I think you could easily replace a very basic, phone line customer service group with an AI, with a chat AI. I think you could do that now today, or even one of those VoIP AIs, right? Some of those systems are pretty great as well, or have gotten a lot better. A lot more intelligent and able to basically take a customer from point A to point B successfully. But this idea that like entire section, like massive sections of a company are going to just be eliminated by AI, it's not happening. It's just not, that's not where the technology is. Like most companies are still very sensitive to needing a human being to essentially supervise these artificial intelligence technologies and supervise their outputs as well, right? Like we all use ChatGPT at this point, and as amazing as it is, when you ask it to do something really important or with a lot of nuance to it, it's not great, and you almost 99% of the time you have to intervene and edit and adjust and tweak things to make it sort of work, right? So I'm always a little skeptical. I'm a little. It's a very surface take, in my opinion. Anyway, so the question they asked here though was, how satisfied are you with compensation in your current or most recent position? And so, I see. So this is from 2022 to 2023. So things have certainly declined a little bit. So very dissatisfied. I guess being very dissatisfied kind of just seems like the naysayers are always going to be the naysayers here. So in 2022 it was 11% and only went to 12%. So that's not a huge change. Somewhat dissatisfied, a little bit larger change there, 5% difference from 2023 to 2022. Sorry, 2022 to 2023. I think that looks like that's I guess being very satisfied though had a big drop too. So take all that into consideration. People who are feeling awesome about their salaries has declined from 2022 to 2023. However, inflation has also gone up quite a bit. And I think that's really probably what this actually is about, or what it ultimately comes down to is we don't really see and feel that, but we do feel how all of a sudden our paycheck doesn't go as far. So I think that's probably a bit more intentional of a way to look at it, is inflation obviously has decreased spending power over the last 2 years, and that's more so what people are feeling. And obviously, salaries have not increased, even in tech, very much, if at all. The slowing of average salary growth was certainly noticed by tech professionals. Just 55% of the respondents reported that they received a salary increase. That's down from 66%. When asked if they felt underpaid in comparison to others in the same occupation and skill level, 54% said that they do, compared to 49%. This is up significantly and helps identify why salary satisfaction is the lowest we have seen in recent years. That one's an interesting one. Curious how you really do gauge that. So when asked if they felt underpaid in comparison to others in the same occupation and skill level, 54% said that they do. How many of us have like multiple people doing our exact same job at our exact same level that we're talking about pay? It feels very like perceptive. It's not literal. I mean, like, I don't talk to my friends about my pay, and I definitely don't talk to people who are in the same domain in my industry about pay. Like, that one's kind of weird. So in my mind, I would think people probably just make an assumption. They're probably thinking, oh yeah, I bet so and so is getting paid better over here or something. But like, the actuality of that question is kind of a weird one. So I don't know. People are talking to each other a lot about their pay. I don't know. Maybe maybe younger workers do that. That's definitely not something I do or have ever done with anybody. It's definitely one of those kind of like sensitive topics. You don't just like talk to people you work with about your pay, or even just people in your industry. It's kind of weird. I'm curious how they really actually gauge that. Merit raise quote was the reason cited most often for a salary increase at 41%. That's up 10 percentage points from 2022. Of those respondents, 61% are satisfied with their overall compensation. This is high compared to the overall compensation satisfaction across all tech professionals in the study. Yeah, and I mean, that's holds up too. I think maybe you have typically the equity increase on top of the merit raise, but like, everybody almost always gets the merit raise. If you don't get that at all, that is a bummer. But it looks like decrease. So it's kind of interesting. It's 6% difference in the decrease from 1 year ago, and then increased from 1 year ago, but then you have a 10% change. So that is interesting. So people are definitely also getting paid more in certain cases. Not surprising, salary increases from a change in employers led to the highest percentage of compensation satisfaction. Yep. Though only 15% of respondents attributed this as the reason for their salary increase. So 75% of them were satisfied with their overall salary. Tech professionals have a degree of negotiating power when starting a new role, so it's unsurprising that many manage to reach an agreement that aligns better with their expectations. Switching jobs is not always going to result in positive salary growth. Truth, I've been through that. I've taken pay reductions, gotten pay increases. I've gone both ways in that when changing jobs. However, as our data shows that it is still the most common reason cited for a salary decrease. The second most common cause of salary decrease is a layoff. The percentage of respondents who attribute salary decreases to layoffs increased substantially. Yeah, I could see too, maybe something here is, in these last few years, you've had a lot of people just pivoting out of certain jobs. So there's been a lot of people who have been working for companies that didn't embrace the remote thing, or maybe had it for a while, right? And the company finally just said no. And then you have a lot of people leaving as a result, and that would look like, okay, I'm pivoting out of this thing. Typically, if you pivot out of tech entirely, then you're taking a paid decrease to do whatever you're doing. You're kind of usually starting over in terms of your skill set, or you're going to a much smaller company who does remote, who is accepting remote positions, and usually that's going to be a pay decrease, just naturally, right, if you go to a smaller company. So that also kind of, I think, is part of that trend. At least it would seem to make sense that that would be a big part of the trend. So regarding negotiation, while the percentage of tech professionals who negotiated their compensation in the process of joining a new company is similar to last year's report at 49%, the share of tech professionals who negotiated their compensation at their current company increased. This indicates that despite market uncertainty and an assumed move toward frugality within many companies, tech talent still holds strong expectations regarding career and salary growth. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a big part of the reason anyone gets into tech. There's only a handful of people that do it because they have a deep-rooted passion for technology. It is, that is I would say, a minority of people. Most people are doing it because pay and benefits are amazing and have been for 15 years at this point, almost 20 years, that mainstream, tech company culture has been a thing. In the 2023 Tech Sentiment Report, they reported that 60% of tech professionals intend to seek new employment in the next year. That's kind of surprising because, again, just speaking to how much other reporting has been done of people saying that they're going to just buckle down and maintain status quo just because of the job uncertainty. So that's kind of a surprising number, but this is probably a little more intentional than some of the other reporting I've seen that supports that. In a market where the average salary growth has flattened and the cost of living is rising, skilled talent will be looking for an opportunity to take advantage of the pay bump that often comes with accepting a new position. However, not all tech professionals realize they can effectively negotiate for what they want. They found that some 41% of tech professionals with 5 years or less of experience negotiated their salary at a new employer versus 52% of those with more than 5 years of experience, which, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Just apathy, I guess. When you get older and more experienced, you just don't care as much. But that's just one metric, of course, in the big picture here. Yeah, so just interesting stuff about negotiation. So coming back to this graph here, so the main reason for your salary increase, so let's look at 2022. So became employed. Okay, so they got a job, full-time, first job, etc. So that was 5% of people. That was the reason they got a salary increase. 24% changed employers. That's a large chunk. And then merit raise. So actually, I didn't notice if did they have equity, mandated increases, increased bonus, obtained certs, cost of living, overtime, other. So they don't specify. They're not going to have the other. I could download it, but I don't care that much, I guess. Yeah, curious if merit raise also includes equity, because that's a big factor in salary growth, and I guess too whether they really do maybe include that as equity part of salary in this kind of overall set of data. It doesn't really clarify that. But one thing I'll say regarding getting a pay increase, changing employers, that doesn't hold up if there is equity, right? If you have RSUs or stock options in a company, you will make more money over time versus changing jobs because you have the vesting cycles. So everyone in tech knows, and a big reason you get into tech is RSUs, right? Everyone knows that. So everyone in tech knows that. So your salary is one facet, right? And oftentimes the real game changer in the tech industry is the equity that the company also gives you on top of your regular salary rate. So I think people get a little misled, or they just are a little short-sighted on that. It's like, yes, your salary goes up going from one company to another. Your annual salary goes up, but you are potentially leaving a lot more money on the table, walking away from vesting cycles of RSUs or stock options of some kind. Stock options are a little, more of a variable because it's typically, you have to hope the company does well because you're having to put money up front, essentially, right, to buy the stock option, whatever that package is, and then obviously hope that the company does well and the stock goes up. But with RSUs, RSUs are, usually structured in a pretty cool way where just by default, as you spend more time at that company, you are going to make a lot more money with those reserved shares. So I kind of push back on that idea of the constant, talking of, and a lot of reporting that comes out on this idea that as long as you change jobs a lot, you're going to just continue to make more and more money. You won't. If you were to spend, 8 years, 10 years at one big tech company, you will more than likely have more money to your name. If you saved it all, of course, let's just say, hypothetically, you saved every dollar, and, your bills were exactly the same for 8 years straight, you will have made more money, more dollars in 8 years at a company where there's a decent RSU package compared to jumping around to other ones where you never really end up vesting anything. So now, granted, I'll say, if you're averaging 4 years at a company, which to me, I'm like, I don't think the average, last I heard, or last time I cared to look, the average tenure in tech is like not even 2 years. So you're not even vesting half. And usually the vest rate, and this is deliberate with these companies, right? You will only vest, I believe it's the first 25%, usually is how some companies do it. They let you vest the first 20 or 25% of the whole package after 1 full year. And then it's like every quarter from there, you vest a proportionate amount. So they kind of know up front, like people, will drop out, or decide a role is not for them, or be, excited and led away to another company because of a higher salary at that other company that they may be offering. So, companies know that. So their RSU vesting is built in a way that it still respects anyone who stays for an extended amount of time, which makes sense. That's the differentiator in terms of earnings in tech. So, all right, that's enough of my perspective on RSUs. So looks like we are just about done with this. Thought this was an interesting piece of information, the data here that's been listed. So we'll close it off, and that's that. Doesn't look like anyone watched this. So you see this at some point in the future. Thank you for watching it when it wasn't live anymore.